Hey, what's up you guys, Shaun here. Welcome to part 2B of my hiring experience at Universal Studios Hollywood. This video is basically a recap of what happened at Halloween Horror Nights. If you haven't seen part 2A, be sure to check out the previous video where I talked about my overall experience at Halloween Horror Nights and being able to work during that time period. And it was a lot of fun. Again, be sure to watch the video. In fact, the iCards annotation popped up on the screen, so go and check out the video. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed going to Halloween Horror Nights this year, and especially working at it. And what better way to experience Halloween Horror Nights for the very first time than to actually work at it. And for those of you guys who don't know, I worked at the Ash vs. Evil Dead maze. This video is actually going to be composed of 3 different sections. So part 1 of this video is going to be about the full recap or summary of Halloween Horror Nights 2017. Part 2, I'll talk a little bit about the maze that I was in and even show you footage before the scare actors even got involved with the maze, which was a lot of fun. And then part 3, I'm going to talk about my least favorite maze, work my way up to my absolute #1 favorite maze. Let me just say very quickly that if you guys have young viewers, this might have a few little scary images here and there, so be ready for them. So as soon as you enter the front gates of Halloween Horror Nights, you're met with the very first scare zone. That was called Halloween. It stretched from the front entrance all the way down to the Universal Plaza. And in this scare zone, it's composed of a couple of stilt walkers and a few scare actors that were in traditional Halloween costumes. Some of them were manipulated to look kind of scary, some of them had knives, some of them were walking around scaring people, and yes, even a few had chainsaws. So about midway through the scare zone, you had 2 options. One, you continue on to the Universal Plaza, or you can take a sharp right to Waterworld to check out the first maze, Titans of Terror. This is where you got to meet Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, and Leatherface. This isn't the Terror Tram. This is the maze that featured these 3 characters. This doesn't have Chucky at all. If you decided not to go to Titans of Terror, you can go to the Universal Plaza where they had the Horrors of Blumhouse. In this maze, it features The Purge, Sinister, and their latest film, Happy Death Day. Exiting out of Blumhouse, you can either go back to Halloween, or you can take a very sharp right to AMC's The Walking Dead attraction. Now this actually isn't a part of Halloween Horror Nights because this is a year-round attraction at Universal Studios Hollywood. So you can actually experience this during either the daytime or during Halloween Horror Nights. And as we all know, The Walking Dead will feature zombies. It's probably the shortest maze in the entire Halloween Horror Nights lineup. As we exit out of Halloween past the former Shrek 4D building, you have several different options. One, you can check out the Jabberwocky Show, which is a dance group that was featured at Halloween Horror Nights, both from last year and this year. They're basically like an interpretive dance group. Here's just a few little clips from their show. They are pretty well synced, and it was a very impressive show. Or ride the Simpsons ride. Or do something even better. Check out the Titans of Terror Tram, hosted by Child's Play serial killer Chucky. The trams literally drop you off at the Whoville sets where Chucky and his minions are waiting for you with chainsaws. Upon escaping the Chucky dolls, you get to check out some of the most famous sets in Hollywood. The Bates Motel, the Psycho House, and the War of the Worlds set that was used in Steven Spielberg's War of the Worlds. And hey, you might even get a picture with Norman Bates at the Psycho House. After leaving Titans of Terror Tram, you can either check out the Simpsons ride or head down to the lower lot to check out Insidious, Beyond the Further. This maze features a bunch of scenes from some of their films. If you don't want to check out Insidious, you can definitely check out Jurassic Park in the Dark. This is a year-round attraction at Universal Studios Hollywood, but for Halloween Horror Nights, it has a little bit of a twist. Remember I said, in the dark? That's right, you got to experience this ride in the dark. Other attractions that you can check out on the lower lot were the Revenge of the Mummy ride and Transformers the Ride 3D. So before hitting the Metro sets, you were hit with another maze, Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. It took them 12 years to bring this maze to Halloween Horror Nights. Well, guess what? They brought it here, and it was amazing. It was a really good maze, and I thought they did an excellent job in recreating some of the most iconic sets that were used in the movie. After leaving Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, you would have to go all the way around back through Revenge of the Mummy and Transformers to head back to the Metro sets. However, before hitting the Metro sets, you are hit with another scare zone, Toxic Tunnel. The plot is very simple. Toxic waste has been dumped into a tunnel where workers were working on, I guess, pipe work. They were infected and became zombies, and now they're out to get you. Upon exiting out of the toxic tunnel, you will walk past the King Kong 360 3D attraction before hitting the metro sets. However, before entering the metro sets, you have to face off with the devil himself in Urban Inferno, where you're literally sent to hell. The devil and his minions are out to get you in this scare zone, and trust me, there was a lot of really good scares in this scare zone. A lot more than what you would get out of the Halloween or Toxic Tunnel, because it was a terrifying experience. Upon exiting out of Urban Inferno, you're met with the next maze, Ash vs. Evil Dead. This maze features Bruce Campbell's character, Ash, versus the Deadites, in an all-out battle against evil. Like I said before, this was the maze that I got to work at, and I had an absolute blast. And again, I'll be talking about this one later on in the video. After leaving Ash, you're then rushed into the next entrance to the next maze, Saw, the Games of Jigsaw. This maze was supposed to have been like a walkthrough trailer for their latest film, Jigsaw, which unfortunately bombed. And this maze, yeah, was an interesting maze. I'm going to be talking about this one later on down the road. After leaving Saw, you're left with one last maze to check out. American Horror Story, more specifically featuring Roanoke. This maze features scenes from that hit show, and let me just say that it was interesting once again, and I'll be talking about this maze in a little bit. It was, again, interesting. So there you go, you guys. That was the whole recap of Halloween Horror Nights 2017, the different mazes, and the scare zones, and the Jabberwocky show. This by far was the most mazes that Universal's ever had. There were a total of 8 mazes. So now that that's out of the way, let's switch gears and talk about the maze that I worked at. Ash vs. Evil Dead. This is the maze that I got hooked up with from the very beginning since my orientation day. It features scenes and sets from seasons 1 and 2 from Ash vs. Evil Dead, which is on Starz. It didn't feature anything from season 3 because it hasn't premiered yet. So upon entering the maze, you get to walk through Ash's trailer. This is where he gets to hang out, and it's in a trailer park. His first encounter with a Deadite was Vivian, one of his neighbors, and he's supposed to be shooting her in the chest, and he's going, "Yo, Granny, it's time to dance!" Upon exiting out of the trailer, you're then met with Vivian, who appears behind a curtain, and that, of course, is a jump scare. Upon leaving that area, you go past an area where you meet up with Ash's boss. Now, his boss was actually featured in season 1, like in the first couple of episodes of the season of Ash vs. Evil Dead. His character really didn't have that big of a role, but it was, I guess, significant for them to add into the maze itself. Then we jump from season 1 up to season 2, where we get to see Elk Grove, Michigan, his hometown. And then off to the side, we see his house. Or at least it used to be. On the side of the house, we see spray painted along the side, Ashy Slashy. You actually hear them chanting Ashy Slashy. Before entering the house, another Deadite pops out to scare you. Again, another jump scare. Upon entering the house, you walk through a hallway and go past a door that says Cheryl. This is, of course, his sister from season 2, and she was also featured in the Evil Dead movies. We then enter Ash's room, where we get to see him fighting off against his sister. Originally, this was supposed to be a puppet effect, but it didn't work for some reason. Upon leaving his bedroom, we go back to season 1, where we see one of his former partners in crime, and unfortunately, this is a person that he actually had an affair with. Oh, and did I forget to mention that she was actually a cop? After leaving his dead girlfriend, we enter a very creepy forest, where she comes out to jump scare you once again. Then we walk through a whole bunch of vines, and then we come upon the cabin. This is the cabin where it all began. 30 years ago, he and his friends stayed at a cabin. That's where he found the Necronomicon, the Book of the Dead. Before entering the cabin, Ash comes out and says, "My name is Ash Williams. I am here to save the world from evil." Again. As you enter the cabin, it looks pretty much like what it used to look like in the Evil Dead film. Now, he's not in there, but Pablo is supposed to be in there, and the book has mysteriously placed its face on his own face, basically, in a way, consuming his face. And that's where we meet a bunch of the evil demon Deadites. And these guys mean business. They are everywhere. They are skinny, they are gray, and they are mean. We walk down this dark hallway where Ash is fighting off a demon. He kills one and claims that it's fighting like a girl. We then jump ahead to Season 2, once again, jump cut from Season 1 to Season 2, where we meet more Deadites, and eventually we meet Henrietta. First a human version, and then the long-necked evil monster character. Let me just say that this thing was huge. It was a huge puppet, and it was really cool to see in person. And the face, it felt like real skin, by the way. Before leaving Henrietta, we are met with Ash, where he once again claims, "Game over." We then enter into a dark room where we hear sound effects of him versus Henrietta, and it sounds pretty gnarly. In fact, here's just a little sample of what it sounded like. Yep, pretty nasty. Upon exiting the maze, you get to see Ash, and he says, "Movie," because he has finally conquered the evil dead. And there you go, you guys. That was the maze. It was a lot of fun to do and actually be a part of. And I can't believe it's over. And now it is time for the third part of this section of this video, where I get to rank the worst maze all the way up to my top #1 favorite maze of Halloween Horror Nights. Let me just state that I will not be including the scare zones in this category because in a way they're not really mazes. They're scare zones. Completely different. So just thought I'd clear that up. What was my least favorite maze? In number 8, it was Saw. I hate to say it, but it was bad. Let's just say that for the sake of this video, I'm not going to show you all of the things that happened in the maze because it's just too graphic to show you. So get a look at what it looks like on the inside here. There are some interior shots. It was brutal, guys. It was like so gross. It showed some of the biggest traps that were used in the franchise. The traps that were featured in this maze were featured in previous movies. I don't even know if there was even a reference to Jigsaw, the new film that came out recently. And again, that movie bombed. And so did this maze. I know I have a few friends that worked at this maze. I know they worked their butts off for this maze. But you know what? This maze was bad. In fact, the first time I went through it, I would have to say that maybe half of the actors were inside the maze. The other actors, I don't know where they were. And some of the effects that were supposed to be working in that maze were either turned off or not working at all. Oh yeah, and let's not forget the smell that they used in that maze. A lot of people thought it was like being in a bathroom. Really, it was just like the smell of manure. It was more spectacle than jump scares because you're just walking through places where you saw the traps and there weren't that many jump scares. Hardly any jump scares. There were a few, but not many. I think that's what really killed it for me. Plus, there were strobe effects everywhere in this maze. So unfortunately, that was the worst maze, in my opinion, for Halloween Horror Nights. Moving on to category number 7, and once again, this is the other maze, one of the other mazes that's down on the Metro sets, or was at the Metro sets. It's not Ash vs. Evil Dead. It was American Horror Story. Unfortunately, I did not like that one either. I've never seen the shows. I've never seen any of the seasons of American Horror Story. I think there's like 3 or 4 seasons. I know they have a new one called American Horror Story Cult. This doesn't have any reference to Cult, at least in my opinion, as far as I know. This was based on Roanoke. Apparently last year's was better because they had more of the seasons. This was just one of the seasons. I think it was season 3. But once again, it was graphic. There was a lot of things in this one that were kind of awful in this maze. And I wasn't particularly, like, excited about this maze. I was kind of having my doubts about it. There was actually one part of the maze that I did like, and it was the tree characters. It was funny because I was going to say in the video, hello Groot, because it looked like it was a Groot type character. It was a guy on stilts. Oh, by the way, there was a big reference to pigs, not only in the American Horror Story maze, but also in Jigsaw. And I don't know what they were thinking when they decided to put these pig characters literally so close to each other in the Metro sets. I mean, they were probably eating like a bacon cheeseburger or something. They were like, bacon, pigs, American Horror Story, Saw, Halloween Horror Nights, done. Yeah, American Horror Story was graphic. I wouldn't say as graphic as Saw, but there was definitely some things that happened in that maze that didn't really appeal to me. So American Horror Story, unfortunately, is number 7. Now, number 6 is going to be a bit of a shock to a lot of you because you guys know that I love this attraction, but this year, unfortunately, didn't cut the cake for me. It was the Titans of Terror Tram. Let me explain. The whole point of this maze was that it was supposed to be a trailer / promotion for the latest Chucky film, Cult of Chucky. However, they didn't do a good job at promoting it in the maze. The only places that you got to see Chucky were either on the video monitors on the tram and at the beginning of the maze. He didn't show up anywhere else in the maze at all. He was at the very front with his chainsaw friends, and that was it. You would think that he would be all over the place on this maze, but nope, he was just at the very front, and that was it. Then you saw him later on back on the Terror Tram, and it's like, well, that wasn't a really good way to promote your new film. The only good thing about this particular maze was that you got to walk past the Whoville sets, the Psycho House, the Bates Motel, and the War of the Worlds set. However, for Titans of Terror Tram, they try to convert the Bates Motel into the Crystal Lake Motel. And in my opinion, that was a big no-no, because this is the Bates Motel. You can't just put a makeshift sign on it saying it's the Crystal Lake Motel, because it's literally like, no. But the good thing was that you were still able to go up to the Psycho House to meet Norman Bates and even get a picture with him. Here's my picture. The other downside to this maze was the Nightmare on Elm Street reference, because yes, they did use War of the Worlds for that, for this, Freddy Krueger thing, but personally, it wasn't a good idea. Maybe they thought it would be an interesting dream sequence, but it didn't work for me because, yes, they did have the normal costumed Freddy Krueger, with his fedora and his sweater and all, but there were other Freddy Kruegers running around that were dressed up as, like, other characters. Like, one was a pilot, one was a soldier, one was a firefighter and a doctor. I think one was a patient. I don't remember seeing that many characters of Freddy Krueger as, like, other characters. Maybe he did a couple of times, but not often, because we always have seen him as the fedora-wearing killer. So, again, that didn't work. I think the only other part that I thought was semi-good was Leatherface's area, but even with that, it just seemed like it lacked a lot of potential. I really feel like this was a last-minute idea, and literally, they have a maze already named Titans of Terror, so they have another maze called Titans of Terror, but adding the word Tram on it wasn't a good idea. So, unfortunately, that was number 6 in my opinion. But don't get me wrong, I do love the studio tour. This has nothing to do with the studio tour. This is just the Titans of Terror Tram, which was a disappointment, unfortunately. Get out! Get out! Get out! You little munchkin! Get out! Moving on to number 5 on my list of favorite mazes. Now we're heading to the top 5s, I should say. Number 5 on my list was the Horrors of Blumhouse. It was, in my opinion, an okay maze. And you know what? Let me just get into it right now. This was a gigantic maze. I think this took maybe 10 minutes to walk through. It was the largest maze that I've seen at Halloween Horror Nights. So it started off really good with the Purge. It actually started off really strong. I liked the detail and the characters that they provided. A lot of the characters were actually from the 3rd Purge film. This is the Purge election year. Then later on, after you left the Purge, you went into another section of the maze dedicated to Happy Death Day, which actually premiered on October 13th. Yes, Friday the 13th, 2017. This is where I felt like it started to go a little bit downhill, because the jump scares were not as frequent. It was an okay section, but I felt like they could have done a little bit more detail work for this particular part of the maze. And then the last but not least, the last part of the maze, which I think was a real downer, was Sinister. And unfortunately, this is where a lot of people complain about Universal Studios Hollywood for their Halloween Horror Nights, because everybody complains about the black walls and saying that there's too many of them. Well, this one definitely had a lot of black walls. Like, I get the idea that it's supposed to be creepy. I get the idea that it's supposed to be this character. It's supposed to get you at night. This particular portion of the maze had a lot of these black walls, and it was actually kind of boring in this portion of the maze because the jump scares were not as frequent, and even if the jump scares happened, you couldn't even see them because the lights weren't going on. The character would be like in front of you. You couldn't see them. It wasn't as scary. So I felt like the jump scares were really downplayed in this. The whole setting for this particular portion of the maze was just bad. In my opinion, if I was the one creating this maze, the Horrors of Blumhouse, this is how I would have done it. Obviously, number one would have been The Purge. People love the Purge franchise. And election year was a big one, so most of it was composed of election year. I'll give them that. A lot of the set pieces were from that film. Next up, instead of Happy Death Day, it would have been Sinister, because then you would have had the creepiness, you would have had the dark rooms. That would have worked perfectly. And then after that, you'd be like, oh, hey, thanks for checking out these films. We know you're big fans of these movies. By the way, we're coming out with another film. It's called Happy Death Day. Here is a walkthrough trailer. And then you walk in through the maze and check out all the new stuff for this new film that's coming out on October 13th. That's how I would have done it. I think that would have been a strong finish because this is a new film and you would want to promote that as like a last item for the maze. That's how I would have done it, but unfortunately they didn't. They put it in the middle of the maze instead of at the end. So again, Blumhouse had its good moments. It had some of its bad moments. So it was, in my opinion, an okay maze. It wasn't great. It was okay. Moving on to maze number 4 on my list, we have Insidious. Now, this maze actually surprised me. I actually thought this maze was pretty good. It had plenty of good jump scares. They had really good effects. I was also impressed on how they were able to incorporate a bunch of scenes from some of their films into this one gigantic maze. And in fact, that's where I think American Horror Story lacked, because they only had one season, whereas Insidious had a bunch of scenes from a bunch of their films. So this was actually a better maze than American Horror Story, in my opinion.
Okay, that one got me.
And the best part about it was that they actually had some of their biggest scares at the very end. They actually came out to get you. So in my opinion, it ranks number 4 on my top 5 favorite mazes. And this is going from worst maze to best maze. So it's in the top 5 categories. So that's pretty good. We're coming down to the wire, folks. We only got 3 mazes left. So which maze is in category number 3? Or spot number 3, however you want to put it. Well, maze number 3 happens to be the Titans of Terror. Yeah, I know, this isn't the Titans of Terror shirt. This is actually the Tram shirt. Go along with me, guys. I got the shirt because I liked it. I thought it was cool. But honestly, I thought Titans of Terror was a lot better than the Tram. In this maze, you see the characters in their own natural environments. Freddy Krueger in Elm Street, Jason Voorhees in Crystal Lake, and Leatherface in, I guess that's the Slaughterhouse. I don't know, I've never seen the films. Instead of trying to cover up the fact that the base motel was the Crystal Lake Motel and War of the Worlds was Nightmare on Elm Street for Freddy Krueger, I felt like these guys in Titans of Terror, the maze, were better off in their natural environments than, say, the Tram. They put in a lot more detail work into the maze than they did for the Tram. And I felt like this was a lot better than the Tram. And instead of having a whole bunch of Freddy Kruegers dressed up as different characters, he was in his own real, like, original costume. You felt like you were in these movies, like you felt like you were in A Nightmare on Elm Street, the Friday the 13th films, and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre films. When you went through the Titans of Terror Tram, you weren't in these environments. You never got the feeling that you were in a nightmare. You never got the feeling you were really in Crystal Lake. In case of Leatherface, they did have a couple of areas where they looked like they were in like a slaughterhouse, but they divided it such that it began right at the beginning for like after you left the Psycho House, and then they reintroduced it again near the end of the maze. Titans of Terror, the maze, was a lot better than the Tram. That's why I ranked it number 3. Okay, only 2 mazes left. What's in spot number 2? Well, it just so happens to be The Shining. Yes, I got the shirt for that one too. Like I stated before, it took them 11 to 12 years to bring The Shining to Halloween Horror Nights. And they really did a fantastic job of portraying a bunch of the most iconic scenes from this film. The iconic Ghost Girl scenes, the bathroom sequence, the bleeding elevator scene. And of course, you can't have The Shining maze without the most iconic scene in movie history. Here's Johnny! Here's Johnny! I thought the production of this maze was amazing. They did a fantastic job. They even recreated the carpet that was used in the hotel for this maze. In fact, I think one of the really awesome ideas they had for this scene was the pepper ghost effect. And it was featuring the two girls that were saying, "Come play with us, Danny," and then they would disappear showing their dead bodies on the ground like you see in the movie. That was really an impressive effect. Yes, I know it was a little cheesy because you could definitely tell it was fake, but still, trying to actually recreate that scene using the pepper ghost effect was awesome. In case you don't know, this same effect is used at Disneyland in the Haunted Mansion. You know, the grand ballroom scene where all the ghosts are dancing around having a party. That's a pepper ghost effect. All in all, this maze was great. It showed that these actors, the set designers, everybody that worked on the maze showed their passion for this film. They wanted to recreate these iconic scenes from this movie for the maze, and you could really tell that in the maze itself, and it was just unbelievable. I went through it a few times because it was just so awesome. So this maze, in my opinion, ranked number 2 on my top 5 favorite mazes at Halloween Horror Nights this year. Okay, only one maze left. Gee, I wonder what maze that could be. That's right, folks. I believe that the number 1 best maze at Halloween Horror Nights 2017 at Universal Studios Hollywood was Ash vs. Evil Dead. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Shaun, you're only saying that because you worked at the maze. Well, that's not entirely true. It is a little bit, but not exactly. Let me explain. Ash vs. Evil Dead was literally the underdog for Halloween Horror Nights 2017. Yes, I know it wasn't the most popular maze, and it probably wasn't the most popular franchise at the event, but you know what? It still, in my opinion, was the best maze. There was one item that this maze had that the other mazes didn't have, and that was comedy. It actually brought a little bit of comedic aspects into the maze, with Ash saying all these really funny remarks to the characters that he was interacting with, and even to guests. It did have some violence here and there. It definitely had plenty of jump scares. The production of this particular maze, exceptionally good. There were some mazes that only had a few scare actors, some maybe more than others, but this one had just the right amount of scare actors to keep you going. And trust me, there were a few times where I worked at the very end of the maze, like at the exit, and everybody that I saw that went through the maze came out laughing. Some of them literally running out because they were either terrified because Ash suddenly scared them, or because they were just having a fun time. Some were actually saying that it was the best maze yet. These are people coming down from the upper lot to the lower lot to the metro sets. To hear them say that they thought it was the best maze yet was a good sign. That was actually the best compliment we could get. And by the way, it was the only maze at Universal Studios Hollywood for Halloween Horror Nights that actually had somebody fighting against evil. In my opinion, it crushed the competition. Not only did it crush the other mazes on the metro sets, but it completely demolished the other mazes that were featured at Halloween Horror Nights. I think it was number 1 in my opinion. So that's it, you guys. That's how I felt about Halloween Horror Nights 2017. It was a blast. I have to admit that I had a lot more fun than I thought I was going to have. And by the way, for those of you who came out to see the maze, thank you so much for checking out the maze. We did have some celebrities show up to the maze. We had some of the Cleveland Cavaliers show up, like LeBron James. We had Pablo Ray Santiago. He was there. One of the other actors from season 3, he was there. We had Selena Gomez, Snoop Dogg, and Smosh. They came out. And Demi Lovato. So we had some big names coming out to the mazes. So that was a lot of fun. I got to see them in person, which was a lot of... Oh, Becky G. Obviously, I can't forget about her. Again, for those of you who came out to see Ash vs. Evil Dead, thank you so much. If you didn't see it, well, don't worry, because there's going to be another video in this series, number 3, which is where I'm going to show you guys the maze itself in full production with the scare actors. It's going to be a fun video, so be ready for that one. On that note, guys, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, hit the thumbs up button. It is greatly appreciated. Don't forget to check out my other channels, the Educational Series, the Disneyland Video Series, and the Travel Town Series. Be sure to follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and I have a P.O. Box if you guys want to see me mail. The P.O. Box address is down below in the description of this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. End scene. And as they say in Hollywood, that's a wrap.